Good afternoon, everyone. This is episode 3 of the Entertainment Room, and with me today we've got Jacob Ottaway once again, and we've got HK Norman joining us.
Hello.
Howdy-ho.
And we have a big one for you today because the Oscars were announced on Monday.
Du, du, du.
Ooh.
Yeah, this was a risky one. We had plenty of nice surprises, and also there were some obvious choices there. Jacob, what did you think of the Oscars?
I think the films that deserve to win won, essentially. I think I was quite happy with all the decisions. I mean, Green Book, Best Picture, I can't really argue with that. Black Panther, brilliant score. I remember you saying you loved the score for Black Panther. And obviously a lot more, which I'll let you guys go for in a minute. The one thing that really confused me was Best Editing, because Best Editing went to Bohemian Rhapsody, which, if it was sound editing, yes, but visual editing, no. And I remember the scene.
Yeah.
I remember the scene where they met, Paul for the first time, and they met obviously their producers for the first time. There was 80 cuts. There was about 80 cuts in the space of 60 seconds, roughly, or something ridiculous like that. It was like watching a roller coaster ride. But I believe, overall, it's probably the best sort of award ceremony we've had, actually. And
Rami Malek definitely deserved Best Actor.
Controversial. I thought Christian Bale should have won it for Vice, and also I felt like Willem Dafoe has once again been snatched at the Oscars. I haven't actually seen his latest film yet, but from the looks of it on the trailer, it looks absolutely phenomenal. It's called it's about Van Gogh, and I think it comes out in the UK. Is it the first? I think it might be the 1st of March. I'm really looking forward to seeing it.
I believe also, I think big props, first of all, to two people. Alfonso Cuarón, Roma. We said last week, we love it. And I think, actually, Alfonso Cuarón is one of the best directors out there at the moment.
Absolutely.
So to win Best Director, and obviously Roma got a whole host of awards as well. Bohemian Rhapsody stormed the night, but big shout to Roma as well. And
I'm also glad Green Book won Best Picture, because it was a nice surprise. I was expecting it to be Bohemian Rhapsody, the favourite, or Roma. So I thought Green Book was, because usually it can be quite predictable, the Oscars, but this year I felt like, I feel like it deserved it.
One of my favourite moments of the night, though, was watching Olivia Colman give her acceptance speech for Best Actress, because if you think about how far she's come in the last 5 years, it was only just a couple of years ago when she was on ITV doing Broadchurch. Before she was an actress, she was a cleaning lady, and now here she is on stage winning an Oscar. It's inspiring, to say the least.
I mean, one of the first things I saw her in was Doctor Who, the 11th Hour with Matt Smith. Yeah, it was practically like a little sideline role, and that's the first thing I ever saw her in.
And now here she, and her acceptance speech was so heartwarming in a way, just to see how humbled she was by this award.
And also, I want to say as well, big props to Lady Gaga. She's the first woman ever to win an Oscar, a Grammy, a BAFTA, and a Golden Globe in the same year. Not many people can say they've done that. I mean, Jared Leto comes to mind. But I just find it, brilliant, because I didn't predict her being able to star in A Star Is Born as well as she did. And, well, she's blown everyone away, quite rightly so.
And her and Bradley Cooper's performance at the Oscars was amazing. I feel like they even outshined Queen, which is quite a trope.
And I was going to say, because you've seen on social media people, worrying about Bradley Cooper and the relationship to ex-wife and things like that, and Lady Gaga coming in and that, it's not worth stressing over that. Just accept how good the performance between the two is, and, it's their job in that role to put together sort of a romantic sort of role.
They're actors, and it's all part of the performance. And his wife looked like she was enjoying the show at all. There's no bad blood there. I don't think. I think it's all just part of an act.
Exactly. So I think social media needs to stop trying to make something out of nothing.
Yeah, they have good chemistry, but it's because they're good actors. And I feel like this whole creating rumours and stuff, it just isn't healthy.
I think social media just needs to stop in general.
Yeah. Also, Regina King winning Best Supporting Actress for If Beale Street Could Talk. That was quite surprising, but it was well given. Best Animated Feature was an obvious
Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse.
I mean, it couldn't go any other way.
No, absolutely not.
Are you saying bad things about The Incredibles too?
Well, I feel like Pixar have gone downhill since, for a while now, since Toy Story 3.
And as good as a film it was, honestly, we saw it coming. I mean, it didn't have the wow factor that Into the Spider-Verse did.
I mean, what made Pixar so special was their first big group of films were so creative and so new and fresh, and I feel like now they're just pumping out sequels and stuff that I feel like can't be like differentiated from the average Disney film. So,
and I think if I could have given the Best Animated Feature award to any other film, it probably would have been Isle of Dogs.
Yeah,
because some people find that animation style a bit creepy. I don't, in a way.
Yeah, I loved Isle of Dogs.
It feels so real, but then again, fantasy at the same time. And I love Wes Anderson as a director. I love his filmmaking style.
I really appreciated the deadpan humour in it, because I'm quite a deadpan person. I found it hilarious, personally.
No, yeah.
I was going to say, it's gripping as well, because there's not many animated films that actually sort of like grip you into the story. That, I could barely understand half of it, but I was still gripped, couldn't take my eyes off it, so a bit surprising. But yeah, like we say, Spider-Man was never going to win that category.
I mean, another film that I felt was robbed a little bit was Avengers Infinity War for visual effects, because the visual effects in Avengers Infinity War were stunning, considering how many visual effects there were in that. The fact that they managed to make Thanos look like an actual living being, like even when interacting with actual real actors, was really well done.
Daddy.
Yeah. And on top of that, I think we need to give a shout out to Bao for winning Best Animated Short Film. If any of you guys watched that, it was shown at the beginning of The Incredibles 2.
Unfortunately, oh yes.
Yeah. Where she basically, the story is you've got this Chinese couple who she's making dumplings for her husband. She gets to the last one. She decides she doesn't want it. Well, she tries to eat it, and all of a sudden it starts crying, and it turns out it's like an actual living thing, and she's basically bringing up this dumpling. It sounds odd, but it was really emotional. I thought it was really funny. And
okay, so if Pixar does anything right these days, it's their little animated shorts.
I loved, I think it was called Piper, the little bird one.
That was the one attached to Finding Dory. That was so beautiful. And there's one on YouTube at the moment called Kit Bull, and I cried. If you haven't watched it, go and watch it.
Although Pixar feels like they've gone downhill, one thing they are doing right is giving the attention to these short little animation companies that make such good short films. Another good one was Best Costume Design. I felt like if Black Panther was to win anything, it was Best Score, because the score was mixed with original African sounding music along with hip hop, which they did in The Great Gatsby, only they mixed it with 1930s jazz, which didn't work as well, but I felt like it worked a lot better at this. And Best Costume Design, because
what they did really well was that they managed to blend traditional African clothing with sort of like given a new spin, like modern or postmodern technology. And those are two things that you normally wouldn't think would go together quite well. So it's certainly an achievement that they managed to do that.
Yeah, unfortunately, A Quiet Place was robbed of Best Sound Editing. I feel like it was the sound in A Quiet Place was phenomenal.
You say that, but to be fair, I'm going to be biased because Bohemian Rhapsody. But first of all, mixing original Queen stuff along with is it Mark Martell, the good cover singer, and obviously new stuff recorded by Brian May. I feel it was brilliant, but then again, I'm biased.
It is quite funny that A Quiet Place was nominated for Best Sound Mixing. In case you haven't watched the film, the majority of it is entirely silent, apart from the odd little sound that draws the monsters in. Most of it is just completely silent, so it's quite funny that it was nominated for sound. And so I feel like that's it for the Oscars. It was quite a good year. Next year I feel like is going to be a bigger year for films, because you got Martin Scorsese's new film. I think Christopher Nolan's films coming out that year. Plenty of superhero films to pick for. Maybe we'll get another nomination for Best Picture for a superhero film. So we'll see.
Yes, indeed.
Should we move on? Now, I'm not a film buff, but Jess and HK are, and there's a lot of things that they've been talking about today, including The Man Who Killed Don Quixote. Tell us about that.
The Man Who Killed Don Quixote. Yes, this is a new trailer for Terry Gilliam's new film. In case you don't know, Terry Gilliam was one of the key members of Monty Python, who released The Holy Grail and The Life of Brian.
And The Meaning of Life. Yeah,
and this film has gone through pre-production hell. HK, I think you know more about this.
So the concept for the film was drawn up in 1989, and there were multiple attempts to get it off the ground between 1989, and it came closest in 2000, so I think 11 years. Filming started in September initially started in September 2000 and then cancelled in November 2000. I can't remember why, off the top of my head. Then there was a repeated attempt in 2016 to get it off the ground, but the producer who was attached to the movie didn't deliver the funding. But then later in 2016, someone else came along and said, okay, I'll give you the funding. And then over 2 years, the film was made and edited and released. And what does 30 years of work amount to for Terry Gilliam and this movie? A weighted score of 56 out of 100 on Metacritic.
Yeah, I mean, it sounded quite interesting. Basically, you got Adam Driver, who's playing a guy called Toby, who's an aspiring filmmaker, but now he's just stuck with doing advertisements. He goes to a Spanish town where he filmed one of his films. You know, it's kind of like a trip down memory lane. And he finds the town's now decrepit and there's not much more memory of the film he directed. And suddenly Jonathan Pryce turns up. Personally, I love Jonathan Pryce. He was in Game of Thrones, Pirates of the Caribbean. And he plays Toby's knight in this film. But now he thinks he's actually the real thing. And basically he mistakes Toby for his squire. And they both go on this like weird road trip together. It sounds odd. It's due to release in USA in April for just one night, and there's currently no launch for the UK, which I find disappointing because I feel like Terry Gilliam's a bigger name in the UK than he is in the USA. We'll see.
I would be quite interested in seeing it because it does have a very interesting premise, and I do love a good road trip movie, but you know, you're right, it does sound a little odd.
Yeah, and Monty Python are also the masters of British comedy as well, but, you know, they're not together anymore, so...
No, they're not. But they do keep cropping up in Terry Gilliam's films, if you've ever seen Brazil.
Yeah, I haven't seen it, but yeah. And also we've got the first teaser for The Irishman, which is due to appear on Netflix. The advertisement was shown during the Oscars, and this is Martin Scorsese's new film. It's adapted from a novel by Charles Brandt called I Heard You Paint Houses. And it's basically about Robert De Niro, who plays this guy called Frank Sheeran, who on his deathbed confesses to murdering an American Teamster union leader called Jimmy Hoffa. And this is basically an unsolved case. And we don't know much about the film at the moment, but it's going to feature Al Pacino and Joe Pesci, but they're going to be edited to make to look a lot younger. So I feel like it's either going to be flashbacks or it's going to be actually set in the past. To be honest, I don't think Joe Pesci needs to be aged down. He already looks basically the same age since the 80s. But yeah. It sounds quite interesting, and I love Martin Scorsese.
And I like the Jimmy Hoffa story in general, but then again, that's because I'm a union person myself, but there you go.
Yeah.
Shatterhand.
Yes.
Shatterhand.
Bond 25 finally has its production title. It's going to be called Shatterhand. This is a working title, so it might not stick, or they might actually keep it for release. Basically, the theory is that all the classic Bonds and also the new ones have been kind of named around the villain, and Shatterhand is the alias of Blofeld, who is the the main villain in the classic Bonds, the bald guy with the scar of his eye and a white fluffy cat. He was last seen in Spectre. Played by Christopher Waltz. All the main cast are expected to return, so that's Naomi Harris, Daniel Craig.
Even Lea Seydoux coming back, the Bond girl.
Yeah, Ben Whishaw and Ralph Fiennes. It's not yet confirmed if Christopher Waltz will be replaying Blofeld or whether they'll do what the classic Bonds did and basically get another actor for him for every film.
I miss Dame Judi Dench.
Something Christoph Waltz said a couple of years ago was said he said he would come back to play Blofeld if Daniel Craig came back as well.
Yeah, Daniel Craig's still here.
And he is still here.
Yeah.
Thing is that Shatterhand, a lot of people are thinking that this could be like a modern day version of Tomorrow Never Dies, because there are some links between Shatterhand, because Shatterhand was Blofeld's alias in Tomorrow Never Dies, so maybe we could see it, like, because it's been done before, like with Casino Royale. That was a remake of the original one, so, and they made Thunderball twice, so
yeah. And it's been it was supposed to be directed by Danny Boyle.
I love Danny Boyle.
Yeah, I'm disappointed it's no longer being directed by Danny Boyle. It's been directed by a name I've never heard of, but when I looked at his filmography, I realised he's directed quite a few things recently.
I'm quite optimistic with this director. He hasn't done many big films in this, but some of the best films that I've seen in the last few years have been made by independent filmmakers, like Thor Ragnarok by Taika Waititi, and he was an independent film director. So
he's been tied to the It remake, Beast of No Nation, which I think is on Netflix. It's supposed to be quite a good film, and also Maniac, which is another Netflix film. So yeah, I wasn't that impressed by Spectre, but we'll see what this one will come out with.
Yes.
I feel like the trend with the Daniel Craig films at the moment is every other film is really good and then every other film is quite bad.
And also I think some of the recent James Bonds have sort of been detracted from a bit because people forget the James Bond films and actually just keep thinking about who's going to be the next James Bond. Because this debate has been going on for years and years. Idris Elba, people like that, I think the debate of who will be the next Bond actually has been detracting from sort of the excitement and the memories of the recent films. I don't think there's ever been a bad James Bond film, but there's a lot of pressure to keep it up.
I feel my personal least favourite of the ones I've watched was Quantum of Solace.
I think Skyfall's a bit overrated.
Yeah. Quantum of Solace was my least favourite. I can't even remember what happens in it. That's how bad it was.
It's basically like a drawn-out sequel, direct sequel to Casino Royale, which is my favourite Bond movie.
Yeah,
but
Casino Royale is my favourite
but
as well.
Quantum of Solace just doesn't hold up as a sequel.
Yeah, and Spectre was disappointing, but we'll see.
Tied up some loose ends, though.
Yeah, it did.
Now, there's been some changes made to the popular film review website Rotten Tomatoes. Jess and HK will tell us more. I believe they're made to sort of prevent trolling, because some of the Marvel films on Rotten Tomatoes were absolutely ruined by people just bad reviewing and sort of trolling the films. Now, Rotten Tomatoes want to change this to make it a bit more fair, I believe. Jess?
Yeah, they had this system where before a film had been released, also you'd get the critics' review because they get pre-screenings, and then the way Rotten Tomatoes is laid out is you've got the critics' review and you've got the audience review. Before a film's released, critics get pre-screenings, so their reviews are usually already up. What the audience get is this voting system where they say, do you want to see this film? Yes or no? And then that percentage is displayed. Rotten Tomatoes have now removed this because they say that people often confuse the do you want to see the film with an actual rating, so the film will suffer in sales because of this. Well, actually, people reckon this is because a lot of people have been using this tactic to completely destroy a film's reputation. And recently, this has been done for Captain Marvel, who people believe a lot of sexist warriors have gone on there to deliberately vote down the film.
It's not a belief, because if you look at what's been said, you can sort of tell that this was a targeted, concerted effort by sexists.
Yeah, and they've been voting down the film because they don't like the idea of a female superhero.
And we did see something similar with Wonder Woman, though not as much, because a couple of years ago it wasn't really as big of a problem as it is nowadays. I don't know what's happened in the last 2 years, but it is certainly a lot more severe.
I feel like the Star Wars series has a lot to do with this, because every new film that's been released, apart from Solo, every new film that's been released in the recent Star Wars reboots has had a female lead. And a lot of Star Wars fans have not liked this because they wrongly say that Star Wars has a majority male audience, and the fact that they're robbing boys of having someone to look up to in the Star Wars universe is wrong.
But men have enough people to look up to, I think.
And also, I personally always experienced an issue during primary school where I liked Star Wars and all these things that were associated with tomboys and boys. And yeah, I do believe that it's kind of a good thing, but that they're having more female characters in Star Wars. But at the same time, it is getting a little bit pushy with this feminist agenda that they've now focusing their whole marketing campaign on.
I feel there's nothing wrong with including the female characters as leads, as long as they're good actors. And I believe every single actor in the newer Star Wars has been brilliant. But, we're right. And, online, there's horrible trolling of these female leads. It's not even just the leads as well. The actor who played Rose, whose name I can't remember for the life of me, she was fine. There was nothing wrong with her. But the trolling of her online was absolutely vile.
Yeah.
Her name was Kelly Marie Tran.
I personally didn't like Rose, but at the same time, I feel like the treatment she got on social media was not called for.
No, it's never called for.
Yeah, not at all.
It's just people doing their jobs at the end of the day,
Absolutely.
You don't troll people for selling fries at McDonald's, so don't troll people for acting and actually doing a very good job in these films.
Yeah.
Let's move on. Let's move on to television. We're going to go into the world of TV. The BBC, a new series Let's talk about it.
Yes,
His
the
Dark
BBC.
Materials.
Yeah, the BBC have released a teaser for His Dark Materials. I believe it's gonna have. It's just a short teaser. It's based on a book trilogy and
By Philip Pullman.
Yeah, by Philip Pullman, a very popular book trilogy, I believe.
And there was a movie made out of one of them. The Northern Lights was adapted into the film The Golden Compass, and that was supposed to be the first film in a trilogy, which never materialised.
Yeah, and it's got one of the things I most like about it. It's got Daphne Keane in it, who played Laura in Logan, and I personally love Daphne Keane.
She is an amazing actress for her age.
Star in the making, absolutely. And it's got James McAvoy in it, who I also really like.
Ooh.
Very good actor.
Yeah.
I love me some James McAvoy.
And so it hasn't got a release date yet, but I'm looking forward to it because I feel like the BBC have been absolutely killing it with these TV shows recently.
So there we go, another good BBC drama hopefully coming out, because obviously, we need these mix of TV dramas as well. It's great that they're reviving Alan Partridge, but at the same time, younger audiences want something new to watch. So things like, His Dark Moments are going to be brilliant. Twilight Zone. What is Twilight Zone and what is it doing?
The Twilight Zone was a classic TV show. I think it was the 50s and 60s, was it? Or it was the early 60s, where it was kind of like it was a bit like a Black Mirror scenario, where it had like a different kind of like sci-fi episode and story every episode. And they've just released a teaser for it. It's been streamed on something I've never heard of before, CBS All Access. Have you guys heard of that?
I've heard of CBS All Access, but that's because I watch too much American telly. It is basically like it's a paid premium online streaming service like Disney Plus or whatever they're calling it, or Sky Go.
Yeah, I'm hoping it will get broadcast in the UK as well. Basically, the thing that made me most excited about it is that Jordan Peele's involved, and he's hosting, narrating, and producing it. And if you don't know Jordan Peele, he's his first-time director. He directed Get Out, which was nominated for multiple Oscars, and it was an absolutely phenomenal film. And he's just released a trailer for his latest film called Us, which looks amazing, and I feel like this guy is going to become the new horror master, after James Wan. And
so coming a long way from his comedy duo with Keegan-Michael Key.
Yeah, he said in the past he struggled to get into directing, and he kind of had to go through the comedy route because it's easier and to actually get into what he wanted to do, which was horror. Yeah, and I fully respect him for that, because Get Out was an absolutely brilliant film for a first film. I'm really looking forward to what he's got to produce next.
And it is interesting to see all these new dramas coming in on these different mediums as well, trying to kick back against the rise of Netflix and Amazon Prime and Hulu and whatever else.
Though I am getting a bit confused now. We've got more streaming service than people on Earth at the moment. I wasn't going to sign up to Hulu, and then they keep on releasing Handmaid's Tale on it. Though it's not so much of an issue at the moment, because in the UK it's broadcast on Channel 4, so it's not. But also you've got more shows. Like Hulu might pick up Daredevil, so I might actually have to sign up to it eventually.
But this is the thing, you can't stop it. I mean, now that Roma, a film which was released on Netflix, was, has got so many rewards and so many awards at these ceremonies, so many streaming platforms will see this and they'll keep trying to get as many things as they can onto there. If Hulu win Daredevil, that's a big pull.
Yeah, I feel like I think it's more of an American thing, but for me, I feel like Hulu is a bit far behind compared to Amazon Prime and Netflix at the moment. I feel like if they get Daredevil, it might definitely give them that push that they need.
I was going to say, I remember when I was growing up, Hulu had just American cartoons on, like The Simpsons. Yeah. So for them, in the space of a decade, to get Daredevil, to get these things, which will keep them in competition with Netflix and things like that. Big pool.
I mean,
fantastic.
we're not sure whether they'll get They have said that they're willing to pick up Daredevil, but we're not sure whether they'll actually get it, or whether Disney are reserving all these Marvel shows that Netflix have cancelled for their streaming service.
I mean, it does seem to be a trend nowadays that television programs that get cancelled either on streaming services or just normal terrestrial channels then get picked up by streaming services.
Yeah, they're just like, it's like musical chairs.
It's like a
TV
saving
shows.
grace in a way, because Designated Survivor was cancelled off ABC and it's been picked up by Netflix. Same thing happened for Lucifer, I think.
Yeah, and
Lucifer was picked up by Prime.
Yeah, and Brooklyn Nine-Nine, there was no excuse for them to drop that because it had really high views.
But now it's back where it belongs on ABC, because everyone who worked on Brooklyn Nine-Nine started at ABC, so...
Yeah.
Let's move on to the world of music and radio. We'll go through this quite quickly because we've got a great debate coming up later on. First of all, Ariana Grande. She is playing at Manchester Pride this year, which has caused a bit of stir and a bit of debate. Now, first of all, it's great to see Ariana Grande coming back to Manchester, because obviously the horrible, horrible terrorist attack at Manchester Arena 2 years ago now, to come back and perform in that city again is huge courage. And actually, she's, the people of Manchester tend to love her. And, it's almost like she's an honorary citizen of Manchester. However, it has caused a bit of debate amongst the LGBTQ community, just simply because it might encourage people, who are not of the LGBTQ plus community, to come to this festival just because of Ariana Grande, but B, because it also puts added costs and implementations on a ceremony of Pride, which should be free. What's your opinion, HK?
Okay, so the thing with Manchester Pride is it's always been a bit controversial because it's one of the only prides in the UK that you've always had to pay. I think last year it was about £50 to get to Manchester Pride. I went to London Pride personally, and I have my own feelings about that, which I'm going to write up on my blog, so I won't get into it there. But that was free. And it was a pretty good parade. I got to shake Sadiq Khan's hands, so, that made my day. So with Manchester Pride, I think it's good that you're encouraging people to go to this thing because of Ariana Grande, because not only are they going to get to see Ariana Grande, but, they might learn something about a community that has been marginalised. And I'm a member of that community, and I know what it feels like to be part of that community and marginalised. So it encourages education. And one thing that Ariana Grande has been brilliant on is advocacy for LGBT rights, but there is a big divide within the LGBT community between the upper and upper middle class LGBT people and lower middle and working class LGBT people like myself, and I think that if you're wanting to celebrate a community that is so diverse in itself, why put a cost on it and turn it into a mechanic for profit? And if Ariana Grande I don't know if she's getting paid for this. I hope she isn't getting paid for it, because if she really does care about the community, she'd do it for free. The concert that they put on at Trafalgar Square every year for London Pride, all the performers play for free because they care that much about the community. And I think that's because it feels more like a community effort if you do it for free, if everyone is able to come for free. It feels a lot more exclusive and a lot more closed off to so many sections of the LGBT community if you slap a 70 quid ticket price on it.
I will just point out, capital cities all over the world, Berlin Pride is free, London Pride is free. However, I still say fair play to Ariana, but I don't know if she's getting paid for this or not. Obviously, this will come out one day, whether she is or not, but it makes a very interesting debate. Jess, any thoughts?
I feel like there's a representation problem here, because obviously LGBTQ people go to Pride to celebrate their culture and their identity, and then you slap a woman who doesn't represent any of these on stage. But
at the end of the day, though, it's like, just because she isn't LGBT doesn't mean she can't be an advocate for the community. She has been one of the staunchest allies ever. I think she's done more than most straight people have done for the advancement of LGBT rights in terms of advocacy. I mean, I have my own feelings about her as an artist, but I cannot fault her when it comes to advocacy for LGBT rights. And so I think it's right that she's being recognised in this way.
Yeah, and
I mean, Sadiq Khan himself, he's not gay, but he as London Mayor has always advocated for a more open and tolerant London. So the fact that he has led the Pride Parade for the last 2 years he's been mayor, and for a third time this coming July, I think it's right that straight people who advocate for the community are able to be recognised in this way.
Yeah, and of course, LGBTQ is not just for members of the community. Straight people who also support the community can also turn up to support their friends and stuff, and just show that they're with them on this. also feel like slapping a price tag onto it also kind of like shuts off a lot of people who are a part of the community who can't afford the tickets.
Or can't even afford the train travel up there anyway.
Yeah, it's not right.
Not right at all.
Moving on, I'll quickly come through some radio things. I'm absolutely devastated, and I don't use this word lightly. I am devastated by the news that Global Radio are sort of nationalising their breakfast show, and it apparently paves the way for some other shows to be nationalised. They're closing down some of their local studios that Global run Heart, Capital FM and Smooth FM.
So what do you mean nationalise?
So essentially they're going to have one breakfast show. There's a lot of local breakfast DJs, a lot of local breakfast producers, and a lot of the studios actually themselves are shutting. Chelmsford studio is shutting, Norwich's studio is shutting. I believe Cambridge is down for closure as well.
Peterborough?
So I'm not sure about Peterborough off the top of my head. So they'll have, obviously, rather than having all the local breakfast shows like they have on these different stations, they'll have one breakfast show national for Capital, one breakfast show national for Smooth, and one breakfast show national for Heart. It's very sad. I can understand why, because obviously pricing pressures and obviously pressures revenue, it's difficult, especially considering they rely so much on ad revenue. But there's a lot of brilliant young producers, young radio people who would go in through these stations. You look around, a lot of the big radio personalities today started in places like these, and this opportunity is being taken away, and it's not their fault or their own. It's not Global's fault as well, but it's just a very, very sad situation for lots of aspiring, local radio DJs, producers, and people who want to have their voices heard through community.
And is this change going to result in a loss of jobs as well?
Most definitely.
Yeah.
Because you and Rhiannon and a few of the other people in our course have been lucky, because through our journalism course, you've been able to get into local radio at the ground level. Not everybody is going to have these opportunities to get in at BBC. These breakfast shows and these local radio studios were the best chance that they had, and now that has robbed a lot, like you said, it's robbed a lot of young people of that opportunity, and it's one that they're not likely to get back unless they're willing to commute to London.
Exactly.
I'm a little bit confused by the situation here. Does that mean we're losing local BBC studios?
BBC are still as they are, so nothing's changed there. It's just Global Radio. They own Capital, Smooth and Heart, so they've had to cut their operations. And it's sad because, it's no one's fault in particular. Money is difficult. We've had recessions, and obviously, they're having to cut people. It's not Global's fault, it's not the DJ's fault, and it's not the fault of aspiring people who want to come into these stations. And obviously that's why, I find it to be a very, very sad situation. And, like I said, a lot of people will start there or have started there. So it's sad that these opportunities go away. On a brighter note, Radio 1's big weekend in Middlesbrough. That's coming up. And they've announced their first acts to be playing there this year. Miley Cyrus, the 1975, Little Mix, Khalid, Zara Larsson and Mabel. This is the only ever time you will see Miley Cyrus in the city of Middlesbrough or anywhere in the UK above Birmingham. So I think, personally, you should make the most of it. But no, it's brilliant. And obviously, the other thing there as well, 1975, British headliners. It's great to have British headliners at gigs like this because it's very easy to get people from over in the States. And you've seen the amount of big acts over in the States, Brockhampton, the Carters, who will come in. But it's great, okay, yes, Miley Cyrus is American, but come on. 1975, Little Mix, I believe, are British.
Yeah.
So fantastic.
Yeah, and 1975 are relatively... it's only recent that they've come into the fold, so it's good that they're getting the recognition that they deserve.
Exactly. They got the recognition at the Brits, and now they're headliners at Radio 1's big weekend. They're just going to keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and they're one of our biggest British assets, so quite thankful for that. Moving on to the video games, our final segment of the podcast this week. Now, I told these guys some news I found this morning, and they were quite surprised and sort of, shocked. So I've been keeping an eye on this. Fortnite and Epic Games have got a $100 million prize pool for obviously competitive Fortnite playing. They've given out $20 million so far, so there's still $80 million of this competitive prize pool to give out. I want to know your guys' opinions on it, because I was thinking, okay, it's great, and you've got your best Fortnite players out there, your ninjas, your Tifus, people like that. What if, say, I was just as good as Fortnite and no one had found me? What if?
Okay, so with this particular thing, the only people who are going to be competing in this are people who are established on YouTube with upwards of 10 million subscribers, upwards of 10 million views per video, churning out Fortnite videos on the daily, they're already going to be making a lot of money in ad revenue. And so they're quite well off. They, in a way, it's like they're cutting off. This would be a great opportunity for young, unknown Fortnite players who haven't been able to get themselves established on YouTube to establish themselves on the Fortnite scene. To me, this looks like it's very much tailored towards Fortnite players who are already established, and to be frank, that's just not fair.
I feel like it makes it less exciting as well, because when you first told us about this, I thought this would be for anybody. I thought, how exciting, some random kid in their bedroom could get £100 million, but then you find out it's just some celebrity on YouTube. It's all of a sudden just makes it a lot less interesting.
I was going to say, there are ways that you can obviously get through this, so there is like, every now and then on Fortnite, there is like a sort of competitive mode where you go in and you get a ranking based on how you've played over these few matches. But only a few people from that, I'd assume, would get in. It's like we say, it's these big names which are getting in. And, like it says, if a little Timmy in his bedroom over in Arizona is the best Fortnite player in the world, we wouldn't know.
Exactly.
And it's very sad, because, like we say, these people are getting enough revenue as it is. Maybe this revenue would encourage, more players and also more people to watch, which means more revenue. If you've got these brilliant young underdogs who no one's ever heard of.
Yeah.
Yeah,
but the world of esports is a cutthroat world anyway.
It is indeed, and I won't go into it this week. We might go into it another time. But FIFA esports, that's huge, and the amount of controversy in that as well has been absolutely monumental. Overkill's Walking Dead.
Yes, this is it's quite a sad topic. A few years ago, Overkill started releasing several cinematic teaser trailers of a new Walking Dead game that wasn't associated with the Telltale series. It looked amazing, you had like different stories in each teaser trailer. I think the first one had this guy, he starts off in this suit and he's on his way to work, then suddenly it starts fading out and the town becomes like overrun with zombies and stuff, and he's carrying a baseball bat. And it looks interesting. Then when we learnt more about the game, it turned out to just be another multiplayer like zombie shooter, a little bit less interesting. And then it finally got released on PC in November last year, and it was due to come out on console, but now they've announced actually it's no longer coming to console. It's been quite a travesty, really. Not a lot of people have been impressed with it. It's only peaked recently. I think when this story came out, actually, it peaked in players, and the concurrent player count was at 307, which isn't much at all for a multiplayer game.
Especially when you compare it to games like The Elder Scrolls Online, World of Warcraft, and Star Wars: The Old Republic. I mean, with these are games that have been out for ages. They've long had their peak, but they still get upwards of 1,000 players at any one time.
Yeah. Basically, what's happened is Skybound, who I think were producing it, have ended their contract with Starbreeze Studio, who I think made the game. And and it's even going to cease supporting it on PC as well. That was a hit and miss, I believe.
And finally, for today, a big ethical debate and discussion, because we all love that, don't we? The Microsoft HoloLens. I'll let Jess give us some more detail on this.
Basically, I'm a little bit confused about what this is. When I first heard about it, I thought it was another VR technology.
That's another thing.
Yeah, and but it seems to be kind of like, when you picture games and you picture in the future and you think it's going to turn your whole bedroom into like the set and stuff. I think it's kind of branching out towards that a bit, where it kind of makes it an augmented reality.
Yes, because it's all part of Windows mixed reality, which is in itself VR technology. But there, on top of that, it does have the mixed augmented reality.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what the ethical debate on this is.
The ethical debate is that it was originally developed for video games, and Microsoft previously sold the prototype to the army, and it was supposed to be used for training soldiers in combat, which the army already does. They play COD and stuff and VR games to prepare them for the actual battlefield. And that's how it was originally used, which is quite, normal in video games such as this. But now recently, a multi-million contract has been made between Microsoft and the US Army where it will now be. They say it will be used to. It will be deployed in battle to turn warfare into video games. So. I don't know whether you've ever seen Guardians of the Galaxy 2, but you've got the gold people and they're controlling their ships.
So it's used to control drones?
I think that's what it is. I'm a little bit confused with it, but basically the ethical issue is employees are currently protesting the contract because they signed up for Microsoft and to develop this technology to play video games, and they're saying they never signed up to develop weapons and things to be used for warfare.
It's absolutely horrible ethically because, think about it. If I worked back at my old job at Curry's PC World and I sold washing machines, and then the person I sold it to turned the washing machine drum into like some massive weapon,
or into a bomb.
It would be absolutely horrible. I'd feel absolutely guilty. And obviously, we're not saying that the US Army are going to make these things, and kill people with these augmented reality sets. But I can imagine the guilt of the game devs, because at the end of the day, they just grew up wanting to make video games for people to enjoy. Enjoyment is a huge part of video games. I don't think they wanted to go into work to make things which cause the opposite of enjoyment.
I was thinking about getting a Microsoft HoloLens set because I've been wanting VR for a while now. I am now strong, and it's one of the cheaper options, but I am now strongly reconsidering that.
Yeah. It's odd. It's odd, and it's kind of like ethically. It's
ambiguous.
Ambiguous. I'm a little bit stuck on it. Of course, things like this have been happening for a few years with trainings, and it also, I think it was used in the RAF to train people to use parachutes and stuff. And
training's fine.
Planes. Yeah,
training's fine. But if you're using it as a means of controlling a weapon, that's when it becomes a bit iffy.
I feel like it gives Microsoft a lot of power as well.
It certainly does.
Yeah, they're just a technology company.
We were warned about this in a Call of Duty game.
Yeah.
In Advanced Warfare, the whole thing was around private companies having a monopoly over armies and technology and warfare. This is the beginning of that.
Yeah.
And it's not going to stop, because naturally it's just going to keep going and going. They want to push the bounds of technology, which is great, because we want technology to advance. We couldn't do a podcast 5 years ago. Now we can. You couldn't make weapons out of HoloLenses 5 years ago. Now you can.
If anything, this raises an even bigger question. Has capitalism gone too far?
Yeah.
I don't want to get into that question. I'd rather wrap up the podcast. So I think a slightly longer entertainment room this week, but we thank you very, very much for listening. Jess Clayton-Berry's been the wonderful host, I've been the wonderful brains, and HK's been the wonderful guest. And HK is now going to get 10 seconds to share any social media they wish to share.
Yes, you can follow me on Twitter. I am at HK_Norman. And
there we go. I think that will do for this week.
Join us next Wednesday. We now have booked out this recording studio every Wednesday. So this, you might have noticed, there's a little bit of...
it
ambiguous.
Sounds slightly better.
Yeah, it
so
sounds
much
slightly
better.
There's been a bit ambiguity over when we'll actually release this. This podcast will now be released every Wednesday, sometime after 12:30 to 1 o'clock, and that's going to be it now until I'd say the end of the university year, which is July-ish.
So there we go. You get new content every week, and you are going to absolutely love it. Thank you very much for listening. We hope to talk to you again soon.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much.